I could give some background filler to it's not about that and data and so on. I mean, I've been IFAC really got going. It's been going since 1998, believe it or not. In fact, I bought the firm in 2005, but I didn't really run it. In 2005, somewhat to my surprise, most of the members joined the network I had at the time, Financial Limited. So I concentrated on that, whereas I've really run it properly for like 10 years. And but anyway, the big changes over the last 10 years is really the importance of not just data but documents, and which just seems to be an ever expanding demand. And as it gets easier and easier to do things using AI and so on, guess what? People just demand more and more and more. So the standards just keep going up and up and up. And
hello, can you hear me?
We can hear someone. Yeah. Yes. So all these tools which are designed to make things easier in people's life kind of help, but at the same time the bar just keeps going up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a share screen. So I'm in charge of the slides, and I'm going to do effectively on behalf of IFAC. I'm doing the first half. Kirsty and Alistair are here too, and so I may ask them a couple of questions as we go along. And then the second half is really BAT, which is more about the data that's input into our system, BAT, or how BAT as a data operations software firm deals with some of the issues in hand. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen, and off we go. So the first issue is it's on my screen to that way. So my head's going to be turned that way. So if I did all of these seminars, I'd have thought about that a bit earlier. But anyway, so I'm doing IFAC bit. Next slide, and then there's a back piece. So I've done some of the introduction. I own both the companies, so chairman of IFAC really, and more like chief executive of BAT. Jason, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. I'm Jay Redburn, sales director for BAT. Joined about a year ago. Recently been attending and working together with the FCA as well, just to understand their requirements and their progression into the data world and what that looks like for everybody. So yeah, hopefully going to provide some insight on that later. And as Charlie said, we'll go down the road a little bit, not too much, around what BAT can do to help with the operational strain that everybody, frankly, in the industry is feeling at the moment.
We're set for an hour, but we may well get through it quicker. So it slightly depends on how many people ask questions or how much sparks off as we go. We try not to make it death by PowerPoint, so to speak, and just keep going. So that's the agenda. How to understand how data systems, RegTech tools can be used, and the FCA expectations. So this first half, I'm going to go through how the FCA see things, and this should help you to understand how to grow your business and run your business, and on due diligence, which everybody is subjected to on an ongoing basis. And what's really important to understand is one of the big changes over the last 2 years or something is from the way that IFAC see it is not so much firms getting a nasty missive from the FCA, oh my God, they're phoning up in a panic, but equally firms getting a letter from a provider, a supplier, or a counterparty, somebody looking at buying their business and falling over in shock and horror at what's contained there, because of course the pressure comes down. So counterparty pressure is huge in this industry, and everything's fine until it's not fine in our world, and it's not fine when somebody phones up and says, well, I've sold my business and it's all done, we're just going to sign it tomorrow, and then so at the last minute they fail with due diligence. And we had that I think 3 times in the last 6 months, which is a pretty uncomfortable call for somebody who's invested their life in being a financial advisor. So anyway, so the focus is on the FCA, but it comes at you from different ways, because everybody's under pressure from the FCA. So you're asked by the FCA, how do you know that the provider you're dealing with, Transact is the best one for this particular case, or in general. So what we're going to focus on is what data you capture, how you store it, and how you can get things going better. And from the FCA's point of view, they're looking at these points raised in the slide. Data lakes, it's a term they increasingly use, systems and controls, and automated reporting. And here's some really key examples pulled out from the last couple of years of what the FCA is saying. Jason's been up to Canary Wharf to see them and so on, so he's part of their pilot project, so he can expand on that more. But digital reporting is all the rage now, and they want, increasingly, it lends itself to standardised compliance. And they issued a strategy document in 2022, a 3-year document, and how they intend to become a data-led regulator. And that effectively means they're also processing all voice calls. In my opinion, if you phone the FCA, you've got to have it. I'd be very careful about phoning them about anything, to be honest, because it may come across or contact them directly without serious thought, because what comes across to you is a very simple question, may actually come across to them as a really silly one, because you missed something earlier on and take again or cross against your name on their risk dashboard, whatever that is. They refer to it continually. They're going to use auto AI analysis of relationships. So in this dashboard, I guess they use the AI to analyze that, and automating the risk scores against each firm. So they're running tech sprints with industry, including with us, and they're obviously, it doesn't take a genius to just read the Financial Times, focused on fraud, ESG, anti-money laundering, KYC. I think running your business now, you spend about 20% of your time proving your ID, as far as I can make out. It's just never ending. I had another email from the bank this morning saying, well, I've got to redo it. We changed the name of BATS, Broker Admin Technology Limited. We changed it to BATSoft, and that triggered a whole lot of anti-money laundering requirements on all the directors. I couldn't make it up. So key examples of smarter compliance. It's in the reg data collection, which you fill out these forms which expand at a great rate. They're looking at more granular data, faster turnaround, and they're looking to identify harm patterns. These are all FCA buzzwords, and mis-selling trends. Where are they getting, from their point of view, where are they getting their data from? They're getting it from, obviously from FOS, and you report stuff on your reg data, like how many complaints have you had. I know the figure is very low for most firms, but the key emerging risk, really, again, it's counterparties. Alistair, I think you were saying some time ago that the number of requests from providers has gone, the amount of data that providers are providing to the FCA is growing very fast.
Yeah, especially in terms of fraud. Mortgage advisors have probably encountered this a lot more data is then being provided prior to doing anything or even kicking you off the panel. Just suspected areas of investigation now seem to be heading towards the FCA, and the FCA kind of use it as a window to say, well, let's just look at this company a little closer at this stage. But I think, there's going to be a 360 kind of process of reporting whereby the AI will be comparing what you send to the FCA as to what the providers and lenders are sending. So it becomes increasingly more important that you're in control of your data and you're providing accurate information, because AI is going to pick it up now, whereas before it probably didn't have any or very little feed from the providers themselves or the lenders.
I think I'm right in saying in the mortgage market, that's particularly very transactional. Yes. So yeah, the mortgage market is going to be different. You've seen already in the new return, which I think is the CR 009, the information they've asked for has gone from about 8 lines to 80. So it's 10 times more information they want. And that kind of links to what you're charging, your commissions, how you're charging it, which lenders you're using, how many lenders you use, how do you split any charges, extra charges. So they're looking at your fees, how you're charging them, what providers you're using, how many providers. I suppose that indicates also invariably whether you are truly whole of market or not, or whether you're just using 2 or 3 providers all the time. So again, you may have to fall back on your data to prove that you actually are whole of market, and the 5 that you use predominantly are actually the cheapest and the most suitable. So what happens in a fake payslip scenario?
Well, again, that the minute you do that, if you don't pick it up, the lending companies now have the software really to be able to pick it up, and so that would be a soft report to the FCA saying, I've had this come through and I've asked questions. And then you've got to be careful along the AMI fraud process as well, of not tipping off. So it does become more complex, and your data has to be more thorough in order to protect yourself, I think is a way to look at it a bit better. It's gone from them having to prove you wrong or to more like you have to prove you right.
Yeah, and you mentioned the window.
Yeah. So the
Kirsty,
FCA
do you want
kind
to
of have
explain to
a
us
shop
what happens
window.
when the FCA starts to look through the window?
Yeah, so there's a shop window
Well, hang on,
for your
I was
company.
asking Kirsty.
And
That's
okay,
fine.
sorry.
No, go for it. Answer.
Yeah, they effectively look at the company from a risk perspective, and every time something happens or someone reports to them about you or you get a complaint, that goes into sort of the window. So they have a very clear view of your company and its risk profile. And the more that goes into that, obviously, the higher risk you start to come to sort of a tipping point where they may either increase the review of you or come and visit you or start asking more questions about your company, etc. So it's not a one-off process anymore. Everything kind of feedbacks to give them a much more global view of your company, not only from your perspective and what you're putting in, but what everyone else is putting in, including FOSS and lenders and providers and clients themselves directly. So all of it, it's going to be sort of put into one place and put under a risk compression area, so they can say, right, well, this company's now hit the threshold, we're going to start investigating further. So everything that used to be independent now is becoming sort of a centralized process. So it's going to
and it starts off with like some admin questions often, doesn't it? And then it's a potentially a case officer and that sort of thing, and rolls on from there. And it's not just necessarily that sort of side of things. What we've seen as well is sort of consumer duty type questions. So where you've got sort of the manufacturer and the distributor, where you can ask sort of questions both ways. We've seen it on that distribution chain of asking questions when they've got queries on value, for instance, and they've seen the charges and things. You've got some of the manufacturers asking about charges and challenging fair value of the IFA or the of the mortgage broker, and actually challenging that fair value and questions. And that information is probably going somewhere and being fed back to the regulator as well. So there's, they won't necessarily say that, but that's going to go somewhere, and then questions are going to start coming from the regulator as well.
Yes, at the bottom of that slide is RFI letters, request for information letters. I think that's a common inquiry for IFA.
It is, yeah.
I've had this letter from FCA. I don't think it's anything to worry about, do you?
Yes.
And sometimes it isn't, and sometimes it's the way you answer those as well. It's about trying to close those off, and and sometimes they are simply requests for information. Not everything's to catch you out.
Yeah, so a key document to look out for every year, which is the FCA business plan. Unfortunately, it's published on the 30th of April. But, I didn't think about too hard when I was advertising the date of this seminar. But I would bet my right arm that the word data and data-driven regulation is going to be at scale twice the level as it was in the last year's business plan. In fact, that's what I'm going to do. On the 1st of May, I'm going to just do a word count of data on this coming year's business plan, published on the 30th of April, against the previous year. But it's all they're talking about. To be honest, doesn't take a genius to know that. VREX is voluntary requirements and written undertakings. So this is published by the FCA. This is firms they've asked, and it goes on their permission on the register to stop business lines, stop growing. It's very common, or increasingly common, put it that way. And over the last 4 years, it's basically doubled in size. And that doesn't really scratch the surface because there's a whole lot more firms who do it informally. So it doesn't even get reported. So the FCA just said, well, we think it would be wise if you just stopped, but we're not going to publish anything. And so that's sort of thing that can affect you. So what data to capture and store and how to structure it? They're obviously, from the FCA's point of view, this is okay. So they're obviously looking for, in their grid matrix, customer and product data, all the usual indicators of demographics and vulnerable, and a bit like the target market assessment for the IFA community. You have to assess who your product.
I think Charlie's frozen himself. But yeah, I'll chip in while he's unfreezing. But recently, I was part of the FCA sandbox, which you can go onto their website and review. It's not a secret, but just cutting to my time in a minute. Their aim is to enable the right AI startup companies and existing companies to allow them access to the data lakes that they are looking to create or already have. Frankly, to make their own lives a bit easier for identifying outliers, identifying predictive trends and issues that they see coming down the road. So they are enabling is probably too light a word actually for what I've seen that they're looking to do. Oh, you're really starting there, Charlie.
Yes, I've just joined you. Sorry.
Sorry.
I
was billing
Wi-Fi.
Right. So, are you going back on? Yeah.
Well, if you're okay, I'll carry on.
No, yeah, carry on.
That represents the amount of time it takes to switch from Wi-Fi to hotspot 4G. So, what data? Transactional data, product flows, customer journeys, and the most common question from the FCA is talk me through the customer journey. And this is all going to be manifested to you by counterparty audits as well. Providers occasionally who may want to see what's going on in your firm, and anybody who's looking to take over your firm, that these are the sort of things they're going to be looking at. And don't forget, if you're lucky enough to come to sell your business, they normally strike the price and agree the deal before they do their due diligence. So at which
Charlie,
point
is that like
people are booking their cruises.
Charlie, is that like a sort of a data roadmap then for each client from beginning to end?
Is there?
Is that what they're looking for?
Well,
in terms of
yes,
transactional
I think
data?
there is. The next, how do you know you're compliant? And those are all there's all hows. Root cause analysis and conduct breaches. Everybody should have a breach register. It's no good saying, well, we don't have any breaches. So there's internal breaches and there's FCA breaches. But if you've got RIs working for you, they're going to do things wrong. You breach them and you keep a register of that. That's all available on that. Buying data, again, it's all of this is available on BAT. If I just do a quick run through of BAT, so there's about 17 slides here. I'm well up to 20 minutes in, so I'm going to go through this in about 3 or 4 minutes flat and then hand over to Jason. But because it's not really meant to be a selling pitch, but it really helps to give you an idea of how we've designed that in order to show the things which you need to be keeping. So vulnerable clients, how do you meet your financial obligations? On the client list, there's a list of on that as it's shown there. It's a list of vulnerable, potentially vulnerable and not. And then that shows up on the front page of the client. You fill in the pop-up boxes to say why you think they're vulnerable, have they got capacity issues and so on and so forth, and then click go. And in theory, it's very simple. And almost everybody's vulnerable in some way. And so on product data, they're looking at KPIs, complaints, persistency, NTUs, execution only, replacement business. All of this stuff comes out of the reports section on that. There's the reports button at the top. They want to see the providers you're using the most. So if you've got it in a centralized storage, you can just churn all these numbers out, and that's what they want to see, to be honest. That gives you a general risk score across all these different areas. This is the audits that Kirsty or IFAC do anyway, and is available. I think available for everyone. I think the only firm that use it is IFAC. So going into doing external audits on a fund and pulling out the reds and greens. So in this case, advice procedures, generic business areas is high risk. So indicates an advisor is doing everything well, but probably doing a lot of VCTs. So those are the different sections we run, and you should be running. You need registers of all these things. In the old days, you'd have a filing cabinet with a folder for promotions, a folder for inquiry, a folder for audits, breaches, custom registers, and a folder for file checks. So now it's all in the digital world. This is TNC. Again, you need everyone's CPD. It's not good enough to say your professional body. You have to do if you're in the IFA side, the investment side, you've got to do an SPS every year. It's not good enough for the individuals to do it and verify their SPS with the CPD for the professional body, because when they leave, people are going to look at your business and say, well, how did you verify their CPD? And you say, well, he kept it, or she kept it, or they've gone, they've left the organisation. You're obliged to keep these records yourself. So it's the same with the SMCR. So you need a whole lot of data there. We've also got just general auto report writer and the document center. So I think that runs through pretty close. There's a few more slides from me. 4 slides more. So risk registers. So yeah, very keen on keeping a risk register of what they find, and they want to see. They're going to ask you, how do you show accountability inside the firm for the senior management roles? You need to prepare for these questions. They want a single source of truth. I think we pulled that quote from somewhere in the FCA, and they don't like siloed systems. I think data lake refers to centralizing your data, and the key, or a very common bad habit, if you know what I mean, is advisors storing documents locally. So firm running 5 advisors, and they will keep their documents locally, and the main man sits in the middle and says, oh, so-and-so's got them, and so-and-so whistles them up. But that's 5, but it's not centralized storage. And that creates a whole raft of risks that are likely to appear when somebody comes knocking saying, let's have a look at your business. Oh, well, the data's not even in the same place. So your data is your business. We get common weaknesses, things the FCA flag, is all of which, these are all quotes from FCA letters and reports and feedback. And they all feed into these. They used to call it the arrow visit, but there's like a template, a document, like a map with heat map in it. And these are all the areas it cut into 5 or 6 areas: culture, systems, controls, and so on. So, Jason, I think this is your half of the seminar. Does anyone want to ask questions? You're very welcome to just interrupt. Otherwise, you're in danger of dying by death by speech, if you know what I mean. But it is a seminar for you all, and otherwise, Jason, you can take over.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, well, if you have any questions, just pop them in the chat and we can talk through them as they come in. So don't save them till the end. Pop them in now if you have any. So yeah, again, I think there's a double win here as well, because we're certainly not fear mongering about data control and operational awareness, etc. There is a real risk if you don't have that. If you can't evidence control through data, you may well be in trouble in the future. Maybe a few years away, but it's coming. But I think there's another bigger win potentially for any firm involved, is actually that the operational ceiling that you hit stops you from growing the firm as well. So you may well feel constrained because you don't have normally through legacy tech stacks or lack of a tech stack, in terms of, as Charlie was saying, you've got this advisor uses that system or an Excel spreadsheet, and that advisor puts it on paper and puts it in the filing cabinet behind them at home, and this one uses something different. And Kirsty and Alistair will probably talk far better about that than me in terms of gathering the evidence required, even for a simple check, even for a file check, for an ISA top up. It could have been stored in 5 different ways, and depending on who the advisor is. So that lack of uniformity, it doesn't lend itself to either growth of the firm or satisfying your internal compliance, IFAS compliance checks, or let alone the FCA. So, the hot ticket at the minute is, that isn't going away, is AI. You will see AI tools dropping by the wayside because they were created on a bit of a whim because they thought they could do something great and then it didn't really work, or that the application didn't fulfill its promise, which is not what we've done. And we're not going to go for an AI section today for that. But yes, we do have AI capabilities in there for file checking and for data completeness, etc. But in its rawest form, where you can operationally improve and reduce the friction that your firm is having, is by utilising certain AI tools. And I know a lot of you will have already done that with the advisors, certainly at the beginning of the advisor journey, whether it's notation, recording the conversations. We actually received 3 requests yesterday to be able to add video files into BAT, and I know IFAC have had them as well, in terms of adding them as evidence that the BAT system and the BAT AI can then transcribe and then put into the documentation to analyse it and confirm whether client vulnerability has been assessed and acted accordingly. So there are multiple AI tools, there are multiple reasons why you might want to investigate them, and it isn't a one-size-fits-all. Some suit other companies better. If you're at the beginning of a transformational, a tech transformation, and you're still working largely on Word, Excel, paper, some of the AI models will leapfrog a lot of the legwork in between and improve your systems rapidly. But equally, you don't want to test everything. That's probably a bad idea. You do want to isolate your biggest issues, isolate what the market says are the best 3 options, and investigate, and then trial and pick the one if one suits at all, and go down that road. But in terms of the FCA's desire, frankly, to to build the data lakes, to draw the data up from all of the firms that they can. That ultimately is their goal, that they can then not control the data, but they can have a data stream that feeds the data lake, whereby they can dip test and they can come and analyze anything at any time, and they can see these trends coming through. They can foretell or foreshadow, warnings about what the next issue is going to be if there's another bubble, God forbid. But they will start mapping out firms against each other. So behavioural comparisons, if you're a similar size firm to this one, they will start to measure in terms of behaviours and actions as well. So as Charlie's already alluded, if you're not logging enough or any breaches or complaints, then that's a red flag immediately, because they do happen. You're only human. The advisors will make mistakes. Things will pass through the net. So in reality, one of the major issues again is the tech stack or lack of awareness of what a complaint is. In terms of compliance, I'd say the vast majority of everybody on the call and in the industry is logging their compliance in various different ways, in different systems, different sheets, whatever it may be. And yes, BAT has a centralized compliance platform, which many of you on the call will know, is where you can log breaches, complaints, all of your T&C, your CAS, your financial exams, your SPS, everything is in one bubble there, so it's all manageable. And again, not to oversell it. So next slide, please, Charlie. Make sure he's awake. So the reality for you that's coming relatively soon is that because of this improved data and the AI that the FCA are looking to utilise or getting firms to utilise so that they can benefit from that you will be benchmarked, not occasionally and not at an audit. You will be continuously benchmarked based on the data streams that are coming through. It makes it very, very visible to them to come and just verify, a trend in the market or compare the firms that are similar to each other. And again, yes, down to the basic things like you're logging the right number of complaints and breaches in your comparative size firms and growth spikes. So are you growing at a rapid rate versus a similar firm? It may well just be that you're far better, you're far more operationally lean, and that you have the appetite and the desire and the funds to go and aggressively grow the company. But again, they will become aware of this, and this data comes from the FCA itself. Actually, these are the key areas that they will want to look at. So they are looking at anomalies and trend flagging. So there's only one real step you can take here, which is, oh, no, you're okay, Charlie, click on the next one. There we go. So the only rational course of action, frankly, is to mirror or to be aware of what the FCA are going to look at, and ultimately look at the benefits to your firm if you were to adapt the company and your operational procedures. So if you mirror what the regulator is doing and what you're aware enough of what's going to happen in a couple of years' time, and start to prepare for that today and adapt to new systems, new practices, ultimately changing behaviours where they're needed. That is the critical one and the hardest one to get right, I think, because we speak to an awful lot of firms where even if they only have 10 advisors, no one advisor is doing the same thing in the same way, using the same system, so we appreciate that's a very hard ask, but ultimately if you don't align and make your processes and data uniformed and centrally stored so it's easy for you to access, the FCA will probably point in your direction and say, well, if you don't know what's going on internally by using data, you don't really have a chance. We've talked through a lot of this already, so yeah, next slide, please. And again, just continuing the theme, evidencing the key word here is data, and what that gives you is evidence, of course. So are you evidencing consumer duty outcomes and AR oversight, and even down to your training competency and your financial exam outputs? But again, the key word there is that the evidence is produced by the data, verifies it at the very least. And the old adage of we'll fix it when the FCA raises it, I've heard quite a lot over the years. But realistically, if your attitude shifts towards, well, you'll know there's an issue before they do, that's the ideal, because then you get to do something about it. And I get the feeling, the insight from me from the FCA wasn't that, that there's an overhaul that you need to backtrack and fix everything from the past. I think most auditors, and Kirsty may correct me on this, but the appetite is typically, we identified an issue, here's our audit trail and the data of us correcting the issue and putting new practices and new behaviours in place, and here's the evidence of that. I think a lot of auditors, especially from the FCA, want to see a real world scenario where we identified an issue, here was a fix going in place, here's a new set of figures where you can see that trend improving based on data. Does that ring true to you, Kirsty? I mean, I guess
it depends what it is. I mean, hopefully there was no client detriment in there. But,
exactly.
But yeah, generally, it depends on what you found, obviously. But yeah, generally, you're going to put a line in the sand and move forward. And that's what it is. And that's what a lot of it is with the FCA is when they're looking at things, you have to get to a point. And And sometimes it's difficult with the regulator when you're talking about things. You have to go, right, okay, well, we've got to that point and we've now need to be forward thinking. That's in the past. We now have to go forward thinking. And, you know, and we get there when we are working with firms and with the regulator at the same time. We have to get to that point where we say, okay, well, we've done the things that you said. So now we're at that point of those things are in the past. Now we need to go forward looking. So you're absolutely right. And those are the things that we do. And there has to be that line in the sand and we move forward. So yes, absolutely. But yeah.
Because if you're one of these consolidator firms, they're asking those firms asking all the same questions. The FCA are asking them, have you done your consumer duty outcomes, your fair value assessments, AR oversight effectiveness? And you know, all they're doing is passing the pain on, pushing it onto the individuals they're looking to acquire.
But it's a very good point, Charlie, that yeah, when you go, if you were in that position and you're doing due diligence on another firm, which is this, you know, how many going on today, you're only going to ask the same questions as the FCA would do. You want to clarify, you know, is this a good investment? How big is it's a risk assessment, isn't it, Kirsty?
It is, absolutely. And when we do due diligence, when firms are looking to purchase client banks or purchase businesses, then that's exactly what we're looking at. And you're right, and Charlie touched on it earlier, and that's what you're looking for with firms. But you know, and when you're doing file reviews as part of that, you're not always looking to fix what's already there, but you're looking at going, right, well, forward thinking, what can we do? So it's actually not, you know, not like a regular file review where we're going, can you add this? Can you do this now to the file? We're going, right, well, what are we going to do? Well, actually, at the next review, this is what we're going to do. So we're always forward thinking. So it's a slightly different stance to doing things. So you're looking about how you're going forwards rather than looking back. So things are slightly different, but yeah, but that's always the due diligence is what, you know, so what you guys are talking about in terms of data and having things ready for if you're looking to sell a business, you need to be in the right position and everything needs to be in place. So data needs to be there, files and everything needs to be up and in place and be ready, because those are the things that make things fall at the last hurdle when you're ready to sell. And we have seen it. We've seen it a few times. That it gets to that last hurdle on that due diligence and the things aren't there. And it falls at the last hurdle on that bit of due diligence because people can't prove it and they can't evidence it because they haven't got those things. Absolutely, it's never that people don't know their client, but it's that evidence and that data and that proving it, which is why we're always so clear with our clients about, you know, making sure that all these audits are done and these registers are done and all this proving and this evidence. And that's why we probably bang on about it quite a lot. But, you know, it's very clear that you need to be able to do these things because when it comes down to it at the end of the day, yeah, you've known your clients for years, absolutely. But it being up here and in your head is no good when it comes down to it at the end of the day. If you want to sell your business, which you've built on for years, it needs to be there and it needs to be able to be proved and evidenced.
Yeah, and again, the FCA terminology on screen there again is pretty current. So, you know, if you do a self-assessment almost, or obviously use IFAC for you to do it, you know, if you can hand on heart say we're looking to identify risk, we assess the risk from every case, we're looking to prevent harm. I know everybody will say, of course we are, but again, does your data evidence that's the case, or do you say we don't have any data? In which case, you really don't have a leg to stand on and say, yeah, we're identifying risk, because the ADFCA will ultimately end up knowing more than you do about your own data. If there's none, you can't evidence that's out of the window. So
yeah, exactly.
There we go. Next slide, please. And then tab it on a bit. So yeah, the compliance is always, Kirsty will reach through the screen and hit me, but compliance is still unfortunately seen as the final hurdle and frankly the pain that you have to go through to verify certain work. I don't think it's ever seen as the proactive step to de-risk and to grow the business, and where of course if you do it well and right and you have the means to do it well, it's very much the opposite of that. It is actually the best way to reduce the admin, reduce the work, the rework, the time wasted, frankly, between clarification between the admin, the power plan, and all those negative steps that don't need to be there. If you have a connected tech stack, connected way of working, and a transparent way of working, of course you can, see the immediate benefits from that. So you can reduce the cost, and that's where back again will come in, because the appetite from the vast majority of our clients that have come onto the new AI data assessment is that they wanted to push to 100% pre-sale checking using AI, and from day one that's what we've been able to do for everybody. So whether it's for a new advisor or ongoing issues with an advisor, or for everybody, the ability to now just upload the documents, get an immediate scan to tell you what's there, what's not, and what's consistent or inconsistent. Advisors are still using old legacy forms, and they just change the name, the date of birth, whatever it is, and then forget to change the fee or something like that. So the BAT system will identify those inconsistencies and red flag and say there's a problem, for them to go and change it before it gets issued to the client, or God forbid, Kirsty, to identify it for you. So I think that there are, again, that change of mentality again around, compliance and why it's there. Is it just the hammer from the FCA, or should you be putting it more at the front than the back? So again, retrospective auditing and proactivity is the key word there. And I think there's a critical point for me that, when I went to the FCA, I would say, unlike, I might get hurt for this, but unlike the IFA demographic, the vast majority of the people at the FCA meetings were 30 and under. The vast majority. And so I'm not that old, but I felt pretty old in that group. And there was about 700 people. So what I will say is that your client base is radically changing, and I know the advice gap is is in the 90% still. It's a terrifying fact, but the likes of Elon Musk, who yesterday publishes why there's this auto trading, no fees, crypto only today. That won't be forever. So you have to remain relevant to your audience. And if your audience is younger, more savvy, more tech aware, if you're how do we put it? If your current operational ability will take you, as Charlie was saying, if you were still waiting for the admin to tick the box and say, yes, you can put the money in the file, but it will take me 5 days because it's the weekend and I'm on holiday tomorrow, you've got no chance with a younger audience who will say, what are you talking about? I want it in there in the next 10 minutes. And I'm afraid I'm of that ilk too. I'd say, well, why on earth am I waiting 3 days for this and paying you to do it? So there's all these things you need to weigh up about investing into, not just AI, but tech and CRMs and all these things. Thank you, John. So yeah, the positive compliance and procedures that can reduce your costs, we've already gone through a lot, but standardized frameworks, integrated AR oversight tools, again, that's alluding back to BAT again, and or others. There are plenty of other competitor products, or we actually partner with most people we might deem a competitor, but actually they're as good as partners because nobody can do what BAT can do, and we don't do a lot of what they do. So you might need a connected tech stack like we do with IntelliFlow, whereby, yes, you use IntelliFlow for all the things it's pretty good at, but the one thing it can't do is certainly a lot in compliance. So we have a direct feed in from IntelliFlow that produces the documents and the client data and the service plans, where you can then analyze them, get an immediate response, where you can go back. So there is good connectivity there. There are improvements coming, but if your tech stack is the filing cabinet and what's in the advisor's brain, you really don't stand a chance. Next one, please, Charlie.
Unspoken and intangible rules. You haven't mentioned documents. Documents, well, I did earlier. Well, document storage is a real issue. I think that's an emerging risk for everyone.
It is, but it falls into that same the operation side of it is, where are your documents stored? I put a poll out on LinkedIn only a week ago. The majority of people came back with there's too many to count in terms of, is it Word, is it Excel, is it paper, is it CRM, is it BAT, is it this? So the average, I think, ended up being about 6 or 7 different platforms and methods of storing data and documents. And again, this is where it will, give you friction in terms of growing the firm, and it will also definitely cause friction with the FCA if you can't just simply and easily produce a report, a document that gives you what you need. So again, the killer questions, frankly, from the FCA, and that you should be asking internally, are the ARs treated as an extension of you? If not, why not? That's what Kirsty's probably going to say. And like the police say, ignorance is no excuse. So if you don't know, that's clear evidence that you don't control them, as you would do. So killer one there for us is, can you produce the data quickly? Or if the FCA come knocking, you say, okay, give me 2 weeks and I'll come back to you. Your doors will be closed pretty quickly, I would have thought. So again, use it not just not all about that, but if your tech stack is connected and integrated well enough, and your team have got the right behaviors to put all the data in the right places uniformly, you can produce reports and data quickly and easy to satisfy internal checks, to satisfy Kirsty and the FCA. And again, that will give you all that free time to look at investment in the company, training new staff, addressing issues, all those things. And is your growth controlled? I thought that was a pretty important one as well. So we see this with acquisition quite a lot at the minute, where people are acquiring other companies that have maybe not got the right compliance behaviors or infrastructure, and then they spend months trying to backtrack that and trying to fix it or trying to get the data out of it. We are often asked if that can be used for due diligence checks, which unfortunately at this point it can't. However, there are elements where you can, in terms of document data completeness and suitability and things like that. So it has been used by one of our larger clients is using it specifically for one or two major documents, and it does exactly what it needs to do for them. But
it's the ongoing, evidence of the client agreement. Have you got an agreement to say that you can carry on charging 1%? So there's a large network, got thousands of clients, a lot of which who have been acquired. So it's very simple for them to say, everybody send these 4 key documents, one of which is the client agreement, send them in, and then we can check them. And then they do that on BAT. It's done a great service for them. I think the AI actually checks it through, which is not here to talk about the AI today.
Yeah, but exactly that. And another more recent case where a client or a prospective client had acquired various clients and didn't know which clients were on what fee agreement. They had no way of knowing because of the lack of control of the data and storage, etc. So we were able to look at an option where we could simply absorb all the documentation out of IO. We could use our system to identify which clients were on what agreements and give it to them in a single report. Very nice. So next slide, please, Charlie. Okay, practical steps that you can take. So again, if any of this is ringing alarm bells, we can send these slides out afterwards if you want, or you give us a call and we can help, and certainly IFAC can. So the immediate actions, if you conduct an internal health check around your data, around your risk factors, all those things, benchmark complaints, if you have experience or any similar sized companies that you're aware of that you can get data from if they're so willing to share, just on the metrics around complaints and breaches and issues, because we can't share that data also. And then moving on to, if you implement unified compliance data architecture in a simple term, that would be BAT and or working in tandem with IFAC. Are you predictive in terms of your risk indicators? Are you looking at KPI information that tells you that advisor is getting at least 2 NTUs every 3 months, 4 months or something? And that's where, again, BAT using the business book would give you that as well. But again, a huge amount of this is behavioural and the culture within the business leads to the behaviours in the advisors. I do strongly believe that. So depending on how you're training advisors and how tight you are with their outputs, obviously that will create the culture of the firm, whether you're very forgiving if they make mistakes and you just let it whistle past, or you actually take corrective action publicly and deal with the issues. But again, that prove it with data mindset is probably the biggest takeaway I would ask you to have today, is that if you're currently looking at your own data or lack of, and you have an issue, that may not be the only answer. There may be many other things you may to put in place, but obviously we can consult to a degree on that as well. So yeah, this was a big point I took from the FCA meetings, but it's no longer supervising firms manually. It is taking aggressive steps to reduce the manual workload for itself. Therefore, improve data absorption, data lakes that give them the trend analysis easily and quickly, immediately. They are looking to use multiple AI tools so that at the flick of a red button, they can see these companies have gone into the red in terms of growth or acquisition without control or whatever it's going to be. But they are looking for risk prediction based on trends. That is ultimately what they're going into. And again, I know Alistair amended this. Did I let Alistair finish on this one, actually, if you don't mind? So the key takeaway line from the bottom there, it's changed this morning to Alistair's, can you prove your data? Can your data prove your firm is under control? I told you who changed it. Why did we change that this morning, Alistair?
Well, there's a subtle difference in the language. Is that it used to be that you could say, arrive 2 weeks later, as you've said in the past, here's my data now. The FCA on the sort of a precipice of turning the legislative process around and saying, unless you can prove it now, you're guilty. It always used to be that you could say, well, I'm innocent until that they could prove that you're wrong, and they have to go through your data to prove that. But I think they're changing it fundamentally to saying, if you can't provide the data, you're guilty. And that is a big change in processing and how you have to have your data to back up your innocence. It used to be that you could sit there and say, well, it is there. I can go to my clients and ask them or get this information from various different areas. But the way they're creating the reporting now and what they want from your software is to be able to justify that. So if you say, well, I don't have any clients that are vulnerable, they're going to go, well, why? Because we expect like 1 in 3 or 1 in 4. So show us from your data that's the case, and then you've got to prove that. And then they're going to look at your sort of consumer duty as well. They're going to say, well, how does your consumer duty show this? And if you don't have that to hand, it's almost like they're just not going to believe you. So in some ways, that's exactly how they're going to structure their process. They're going to judge you by your data. And if your data isn't good enough and can't back up what you're saying, I think you're going to have a big fight with the FCA, as opposed to them saying, okay, well, your data seems to corroborate that, or that it hasn't been picked up. That's acceptable. If it's the case that you just don't have the evidence of the data, you just can't defend yourself anymore.
Yeah, and
So I think it's very much that your control has to, and I think they also want you to be viewing it. That's the other side of it. I don't know if you came across, but from what I've read, the FCA are sort of saying you should be doing a monthly or at least quarterly review of everything. And then that's not just your financials anymore. It's not just the financial or your liquidity or whatever. It should be looking at your vulnerability or how your advisors are advising. Your MIs on that statistic should be available for you to review in a very quick format. Press report, and you've got it. And so it's a bit different in how they're seeing you. It seems to me like they're asking a base standard level of data requirements. And so if you don't have that from your CRM or yourself personally, you can do this yourself. You can create it. You can do your reports from wherever you do, but they want you to be able to say, well, I do this monthly or do this quarterly, and here it is.
Okay. So we're running out of time. There's a couple of questions on the forum. Kirsty, do you have an example of what the FCA might request?
The thing is, it's not an example because
it's relative, isn't it?
Yeah, it's relative to what it's going to be about. That's the problem. It's it depends on what the queries are that they're going to ask about. And best practice responses and structure. I mean, what we always try and do is you can only be factual, you can only be honest, you can only be truthful in your response. We always try and close the question off. Because that's the point, because if you don't close a question off, it leads to additional questions. It's the way of trying to answer it. So that's the kind of way in which to try and respond. That's the technique as such. You can try and do that, but so it's hard to give an example, as I say, because it just depends on what it's about. And the problem is they do try and ask in such a way that it leads on to something else, because that is the way they do it. It's a digging way.
Very innocent question.
It's leading.
Yes.
Yeah.
We've seen that. And I think
at this stage, the data, they've only done one thing.
What things which you should be doing. Yeah, Philip's just asked a question. We're just running.
I mean,
about what can you do now? And if I could answer that, I'll send you an email. In fact, I'll send it. Everybody gets this CPD anyway with an email, and it gets uploaded automatically to the BAT system if you're using BAT. One thing you can do now is upload your actual data into a central place, so that if you're thinking of an exit and it's there, it's available for somebody else in the cloud and to view very easily. So that's a very simple thing. People can get a view on your business very quickly that way. And in fact, if you're uploading the documents into BAT, the AI can check completeness of the files 100% straight away, and we can show you how to do that. Some of you already do that.
Yeah, and I would add as well, I think I've spoken to Philip before, but in reality, I think if you treat it as though you were buying a company, how would you want it to be? What would put you off of buying it? And we've had, certainly mentioning no names, but we've had companies who've come to us and said, can you perform this function? I know Kirsty can, but BAT can't retrospectively do that. All you can do is put the data into one place, put all the documentation into one place, analyze the right number of file checks or the appropriate number based on your size and whatever. And if you look pretty good and everything's in one spot, we do have instances where a buying partner will come and buy a license into the existing BAT portal, where they can then just absorb the data, have a look at the reporting, and then continue with it. So again, I would, Charlie, we can come back to Philip directly, but and or IFAC are there for due diligence work as well. So
good. Okay, guys. Well, if there's no other questions, then we can probably take an early lunch. 3 minutes early. Actually, I thought this was when I was going to go. 40 minutes. I thought I will rattle through this in no time at all.
No, there's a lot to go through, but again, I think it's ever shifting sands at the moment with the technology, with the FCA. It's all moving, and so I think there's a million sources. I think LinkedIn throws up some good stuff about what you should be aware of. There's some good podcasts. So there's a multitude of different communications, and it is knowing which ones to affect you in the business more. So I think you can reach out, and again, you can come to us anytime and IFAC and get some advice.
Absolutely.
Super.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Who would be best to contact further? I'll send an email around, Gary, anyway, with your CPD link, so they'll put some information on it. Thank you very much, everyone. Colin, hang on, Colin's typing. Colin, you're typing with one finger. You've got 3.
He's eating a sandwich.